matapos iparamdam ng publiko ang mainit na pagsuporta sa kandidatura ni dating Senador Bongbong Marcos, hindi na malaman ngayon ng kampo ng katunggaling si Vice President Leni Robredo kung paano makakahabol sa popularidad at pangunguna sa surveys ni BBM, kung kaya pilit nilang ipinupukol sa dating senador ang mga kasong isinampa laban sa pamilya nito. Kaya naman, dahil sa patuloy na paglabas ng kabi-kabilang paninira sa Pamilya Marcos mula sa katunggaling pamilya sa politika, partikular na ang pag-akusa sa mga ito ng pagnanakaw umano sa kaban ng yaman, ibinunyag ng manunulat na si Rita Gadi ang katotohanan sa nangyaring trial of the century sa New York laban kay dating First Lady na si Imelda Marcos na natunghayan ng buong mundo. Ayon sa kanya, absuelto ng korte at hindi napatunayan kailanman ang lahat ng bintang ng pamilya Aquino sa Pamilya Marcos.
My goodness. You know, the trial of New York was a trial of the century, they say, and the whole world was watching that. Why? Because, can you imagine, a former head of state, Ferdinand Edralin Marcos, he was accused in a New York courthouse violating an American law because may 4 na building siyang binili doon, and the accusation is yung kanyang gobyerno is a racketeering, influence, and corrupt organization. Because that's the law na supposedly violate niya. RICO, R-I-C-O, that's the RICO case. Racketeering, influence, and corrupt organization law.
A vindication for her, and the way Mr. Spence defended the administration of President Marcos, a vindication for him also.
So tandaan ninyo, kung matatandaan ninyo yung mga unang pangkwento ko as we started this Rita Gadi's Hour, the first case filed actually against the Marcoses under this RICO law was in Los Angeles, sa LA, doon sa court ni Mariana Feltzer. Siya yung district court doon. At ang PCGG ay nagbigay ng mga dokumento sa Justice Department ng Amerika sapagkat hindi naman pwede na ang mga abogado o ang government ng Philippines magpa-file ng case in a foreign court. Mali yun. That is not allowed because under international law, your justice system should be the first act of your sovereignty. So kinailangan na ang file ng case nila dito sa Pilipinas. Pero ayaw nilang pabilikin si President Marcos because they were filing a criminal case. Can you imagine? Pag nanakaw sa taong bayan, that's theft or graft and corruption, however else you would call it. Under our law, that is a criminal offense. So Marcos should have been tried here in the Philippines. Pero ayaw nila because also under our law, the person that's accused must be able to be appearing in court every day that the trial is ongoing. That is a requirement. Kailangan, yan ang karapatan niya na kung sino man nag-a-accuse sa kanya, haharapin niya. Pero ayaw nila. Unang-una, takot sila. Takot sila kay President Marcos kasi magaling na abogado. Pangalawa, natatakot sila na baka yung mga followers ni President Marcos ay talagang andun sila sa courthouse. Alam nila yan. Thirdly, gusto nila na ang Amerika mismo, kasi alam nila ang Amerika is the mightiest sword of justice, yun ang maglilitis. Kaya ang Amerika man naghanap sila ng kanilang batas na pwedeng ipatong kay President Marcos. So they found the RICO case and that was filed in Los Angeles. Of course, all the documents came from the PCGG and the other documents that they were able to source from America, from the banks, from the Swiss, whatever it is. Basta lahat ng dokumento na meron sila. But, isa lang ang witness na pinresent nila doon. Yung mga dokumentong na dinala nila doon, hindi nila ginamit doon sa LA. Ang kanilang ginamit ay mga dyaryo. Philippine Inquirer, lahat yung mga dyaryo na yan, kung saan nakalagay sa mga headlines, Marcos is a thief, Marcos stole so much, Marcos did this, Marcos did that. And they presented one witness, a certain Fernando. Nakalimutan ko nga yung first name niya eh. Nabit-bit niya yung mga dyaryo na yan para ipakita sa court na si Marcos magnanakaw. Yon. So that was the first case that they filed against Marcos. Si Andres Bautista, he should know this kasi PCGG yan eh. And the first chairman of the PCGG signed some kind of a memorandum of understanding with the Assistant Attorney General of America, of the Justice Department. Ang pangalan niya, Victoria Tensing. Hanapin niyo yung mga pangalan na sinasabi ko. Just to be able to make sure that what I am saying is actually factual. Victoria Tensing and this Jovito Solonga signed a memorandum of understanding that they can exchange documents back and forth, Philippines and America, for the case against Marcos. So yon. Andres Bautista should know this kasi PCGG chairman niya sa Salonga, tapos itong si Bautista naging chairman din ng... So you should know the history. So what happened in that case? They lost the case in the court of Mariana Feltzer. They lost it. In other words, it was dismissed. Kasi wala nang ebidensya mga dyaryo ang kanilang pinalabas doon. So nag-appeal. Sabi ko nga, nung nawala yung kaso na yan, nung na-dismiss, nag-intercede si Michael Armacos. Sino ba yung Michael Armacos na yan? He was a former ambassador here in the Philippines. At galit na galit yan kay Mrs. Marcos. Kaya panahon na ni Cory, nakaisip na siyang gumanti. Kaya nung natalo yung kanilang kaso sa regional, hindi regional, sa lower court, regional trial court dito sa Pilipinas yan. Sa lower court dito kay Mariana Feltzer, yung judge, natalo sila doon. Binasa ko sa inyo ito several times. Nag-intercede si Michael Armacos kasi pala yung deal pala ng Amerika, ng bureaucracy ng Washington, this is not American policy, this is the bureaucracy of Washington, and this is under George Shultz, yung sa State Department. Ang deal pala nila ay yung protection ng bases. Kaya yun ang kanilang hinahabol kay Mrs. Aquino kasi you must remember, prior to Mrs. Aquino filing her certificate of candidacy, meron siyang grupo na tinatawag na conveners group. And they signed a document. And in that document, doon nakalista kung ano ang gagawin when Mrs. Aquino assumes power. So talagang naniniguro na sila na lahat sila ay susundin kung ano yung pinagkasunduan. Yung conveners group na yan, meron din akong kopya niyan. Pinirmahan nilang lahat at isa sa mga nakasulat doon, tatanggalin ang American bases. Kasi andun na nga sila sa Longga, lahat yung mga yan, mga ultranationalist nga, etc. Meron doon nakasulat. One of the numbers there na nakasulat doon na pinirmahan ni Mrs. Aquino at lahat ng kasama niya, sila Ong Pin, lahat ng yan sa conveners group ay tatanggalin ang mga bases. Siyempre, alam ng Amerika yan. Kaya nililigawan nila si Mrs. Aquino na wag niyang tuparin, wag niyang ipatupad kung ano yung pinirmahan niya kasi yun nga ang kanilang deal. So yung deal doon, sige, ikukulong namin si Marcos at si Imelda basta yung bases wag mo tatanggalin. Yun ang kanilang exchange deal. Okay? So ang nangyari dyan, natalo yung kaso ng RICO case sa LA, nag-appeal. Bakit? Kasi nag-intercede yung former ambassador Michael Armacos. At yan si Armacos may galit kasi personal ang kanyang galit kay Mrs. Marcos. So they went on appeal. They appealed in the 9th Circuit Court of LA. Court of Appeals na yan. Dininig yung kaso na yon. Babasahin ko sa inyo yung mga portions ng desisyon ng Court of Appeals. Natalo na naman ang Justice Department ng Amerika dyan sa RICO case na yan sa LA at natalo rin ang PCGG kasi sila ang nagbigay na baka dokumento na hindi pala mga dokumento, I'm sorry, yung mga dyaryo. Okay. So ito yung sinabi ng court. On October 3rd, 1986, biruin yun, within the year, February pa lang naupo si Mrs. Aquino, nauna na yung executive order na yan. Excuse me, March, April, May, in October, ito yung nakalagay sa kanilang decision. On October 3rd, 1986, the Philippine government argued and submitted its appeal in case number 86-6091 and 86-6093, DC number CV-86-3859-MRP. Yan, si Mariana Feltzer yan. The United States Court of Appeals for the 9th Circuit with Circuit Judges Nelson Hall and Kozinski rendered their decision. Tandaan niyo yung mga pangalan kasi record dito talaga sa LA. The following points in digest forms are the findings of the court. Ito, number 1, quotation marks itong binabasa ko. The Filipino revolutionary government of Madam Corazon Aquino provides no direct evidence to support its litany of offenses alleged to have been committed by Mr. Marcos. The only knowledge of these facts comes from countless newspaper and first-hand hearsay accounts relating to them. The Aquino government claims that practically everything that the Marcoses must own have been stolen and therefore belongs to the Philippines. It alleges through a sworn statement of its representative, ito pala yung first name, Fernando. So it alleges through its sworn statement of its representative, Rafael Fernando, that there were bribes, kickbacks, interest in business ventures, and other things of value in exchange for the grant of government favors, contracts, licenses, franchises, loans, and at the same time, expropriating outright private property for the benefit of persons beholden to or fronting for Mr. Marcos, and the said expropriation being in times effected by violence or the threat of violence or incarceration and the direct raiding of the public treasury. Yan ang sinampa ng government ni Mrs. Aquino. The court, in answering this claim, issued a ruling that Mr. Fernando provides no direct evidence to support this litany of offenses, and his only knowledge of these facts comes from countless newspaper and first-hand hearsay accounts relating to them, relating to the newspapers. The court, citing the case of Hatch versus Bias, ito yung decision sa Amerika, 7 HUN 600, ruled that in fact, that the defendant has ceased to be president does not destroy his immunity that springs from the capacity in which the acts were done or protects the individual who did them because they emanated from a foreign and friendly government. Paragraph 29. That's the last paragraph. The court concluded that the heart of the case was the assertion of the plaintiff Aquino government and the district court's assumption that all of the Marcos assets must have been stolen. It concluded that the claim and the cause of action of the Aquino government is dismissed under the Act of State and Political Question doctrines, and under either of these doctrines, the plaintiff Aquino government's claim collapses, and with it, its probability of success on the merits. Yan. Kinote nila dito yung case of Underhill versus Hernandez, 168 US 250, 252, 1987 case under the Act of State Doctrine. Yan. So makikita ninyo, yan ang decision. Sinabi nga dito, in order to resolve these various claims against Marcos, the court will have to adjudicate whether Marcos' actions as president were lawful under Philippine law. Yun. Kaya kailangan, ang sinabi nga, dito sa Pilipinas kailangan litisin. Tutuloy ko itong sinabi dito. The court also, this is also part of the decision. The court also rejected the claim of the Aquino government that the Act of State doctrine has no force and effect because it is the Philippines itself that is asking the court to look into the actions of its former ruler. The court stated, ito yung sinabi ng court, we cannot shut our eyes to the political realities that give rise to this litigation, nor to the potential effects on his conduct and resolution. Mr. Marcos and Mrs. Aquino represent only two of the competing political factions engaged in a struggle for control of the Philippines. While the struggle seems to be resolving itself in favor of Mrs. Aquino, this may be the end of this is not maybe the end of the matter. Only 4 years ago, the tables were turned with Mr. Marcos in power and Mrs. Aquino and her husband in exile here in the United States. while we are in no position to judge these things, we cannot rule out the possibility that the pendulum will swing again or that some third force will prevail. Ayan. So, nakikita ninyo, yun ang decision ng Court of Appeals ng LA. Mr. Bautista, yung kaso na yan, PCGG, ikaw, naging chairman ka ng PCGG. When you assume your office, you have to understand the history also of that office. And you should have read this case. That's one. Second, this case was also filed. RICO case was also filed in New York. Ito, kailangan alam mo rin. Kasi sinabi mo sa interview, tingnan ninyo, ang perang ninakaw sa bayan ni ng mga Marcos, nakabili ng mga 4 na real estate dito sa New York. Para kang hindi abogado. At hindi mo tiningnan kung ano yung kaso na yan. 3 months and a half yung trial na yan. Araw-araw. 350,000 documents. Galing din sa PCGG, galing din sa inyong opisina. Galing sa mga bangko. Galing sa mga nakuha ng Amerika, sa mga Marcoses nung sila dumating sa Honolulu. Galing sa mga iba't ibang dokumentong nakuha nila sa Malacanang pag-alis ng mga Marcoses. Kayo rin yan. Yan, si Joker Arroyo at yung PCGG, kayong may hawak niyan. Kayo, opisina mo, Mr. Bautista, at ikaw na upo dyan as chairman. All of these documents presented there in the trial in New York. You had 95 witnesses also that were there. Bakit sila sa Longga hindi naging witness? Ewan ko lang. Bakit ikaw? Hindi ka rin humarap doon. Kasi kayo ang nakaupo sa opisina na yan. Why not point your finger and accuse Mrs. Marcos of having stolen the money of the Filipino people if you're so sure of it? If you have 350,000 documents, sabi ko nga pagpapasok ng prosecutor sa loob ng courtroom, hindi nga briefcase ang dala eh. Ang dala niya grocery cart. Yung ginagamit ninyo pag nagsha-shopping kayo, pag namimili kayo ng grocery, malaki. Ganun kadaming papeles ang kanilang dinadala araw-araw sa korte. At ilang tao ang kanilang pinaupo sa witness stand? 95. Mr. Bautista, you should know that. Did the Marcoses present a single document? No. Did they present a single witness? No. In fact, the defense of President Marcos and Mrs. Marcos used your own documents. Yung documents na pinresent nila, ginamit. Bakit? To prove that there was not a single one of them that could show that there was money taken from the Filipino people. You should know that, Mr. Bautista. So stop saying that the Marcoses were stealing the money of the Filipino people to buy those buildings in New York. Nalitis na yan ng husto sa araw-araw. I was there. I read those documents. I listened to those witnesses. I wrote about it. And I can talk about it as factually and as truthfully as I am sitting here. Why am I answering this? Because you are there seated with this lady who made this documentary against Mrs. Marcos, the kingmaker, na sinasabi nga na ayan, wag na silang babalik sa Malacanang sapagkat kinuha nila lahat ng pera ng taong bayan. My goodness! You have no right, Mr. Bautista, to even say it. Precisely because you sat in that office. Tapos sa COMELEC, anong ginawa mo? Nagkaroon ng maraming investigasyon tungkol sa ginamit na Smartmatic. Saka na natin pag-uusapan yung COMELEC na pag-upo mo. Pero ito kasi yung interview sa'yo, hindi naman tungkol sa COMELEC. Yung interview sa'yo, tungkol nga sa sinasabi mong nakaw na yaman ng mga Marcoses. And then, ito talaga, I'm sorry kung nag-iinit ang ulo ko dito because this is really the face of a liar and the face of a hypocrite. Really, if I have to say it. Because, nagkaroon ng isang salo-salo or a gathering. I don't know even if it is a party or whatever, but he was invited. May kaibigan si Mrs. Marcos na kaibigan nitong si Andres Bautista. Kasama siya sa inimbita doon sa condominium ni Mrs. Marcos, dyan sa Pacific Plaza. Okay. At andun siya. Nakisalo-salo siya, kumain siya, nakipag-usap kay Mrs. Marcos at lahat. Pagkatapos nakita niya, doon sa likod ng isang sofa sa sala ni Mrs. Marcos, meron 2 painting. Actually, maraming paintings Hindi na lang niya siguro na-identify yung iba pa. Merong isang Picasso at saka merong isang painting doon. Si Mrs. Marcos pa nga ang nagsabi sa kanya, oh, this is by this painter. And yes, that is a Picasso, it's an original. So, ang ginawa ni itong si Andres Bautista, pa-picture-picture kunyari, dun sa sa harapan ng mga painting na yon, kunyari pa-posing-posing. May intention siya na kukunin yung mga paintings na yon. Kasi sabi nga niya, sinabi rin niya sa interview, because they're subject of the litigation. Mr. Bautista, you should read Executive Orders 1, 2, 12, and 12A. Because your office, the PCGG, has only up to a certain period to have the authority to sequester and to file cases. May deadline kayo, yung opisina mo. It doesn't mean to say na forever pwede niyong litisin ang mga Marcoses. May deadline by your own law. And yet, you claim that the reason why you were interested in those paintings because they're subject of litigation. Anong litigation ang pinag-uusapan mo? That was when? 2-3 years ago? Tapos na. Expired na yung authority ninyo.